Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see all of you here. Welcome. Good to see you back again. Glad you got back safely. Welcome to our international audience too. We're going to have an overview on Passover today, and this is a Bible study. I'm sitting down today. I invite your questions. Not comments per se, because we'd be here all morning, but especially questions. A few comments are fine, but we mostly want to just get questions to clarify Passover and understand a few things. And I'm going to ask God's blessing. We're going to start right now. Eternal God, thank you for each one who's here, who's watching by the internet. Anoint what we do and say here today, please, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, a couple of things. We hear a lot about the vaccines. People are trying to make a decision if they want to take them. I would never, ever, ever offer you any medical advice. I have not had the vaccine, nor have I sought it. But we do have to take all things into consideration. Just yesterday, I saw something on the news where a legendary heavyweight champion, his name was Hagler, died after taking the vaccine.
Marvin Hagler.
Marvin Hagler. Somebody who knew him, who was his life coach and some kind of a motivational speaker, he made this statement. He said, please do your own research before making a decision on putting something in your body that has not been tested properly. And we're being used as the guinea pigs, and you're not told the truth about it. So the government's doing the best it can. I'm going to give them that they're trying. However, we're the guinea pigs. They're testing it on us. Oh, that worked pretty well. Well, that didn't work so well. Okay. So I'm not telling you what to do. What I'm doing right now is drinking green tea a couple of times a day, taking my vitamins, and trying to use some caution and wisdom and trusting God to keep me safe. I'm not giving you my word I won't take the vaccine, but I have no desire to right now, and that's up to you. And if you have done it, that's entirely up to you. Some people have religious things against it. Don't let a preacher tell you that it's a sin or it's against the church doctrine. That's between you and your doctor, not between you and your pastor. You make the decision based on good, sound medical advice and your faith in God, not what some pastor tells you, okay? Some people think it's a sin to take a vaccine. It's a sin to even go to a doctor. Don't believe that. Any questions on that or the vaccine or thoughts about that? Yes,
It's a comment, and I won't comment if you don't want me.
No, go ahead.
My thought is, God gives men the ability to come up with ways to make this vaccine.
Yeah.
So if God's there helping them to create this vaccine, is it not okay to take it?
Yeah, I'm really glad people are taking it, because if everybody out there takes it, I won't have to. I'm glad they're taking
Well,
it.
you don't like needles anyway.
Oh, I can't stand needles. No, I had a nerve conduction test or something the other day, and they were sticking needles in me all over the place. And you won't bleed. Yeah, I did too. But anyway, yeah, I'm happy for everybody to take the vaccine.
The only reason I say that is, my wife had cancer.
Yeah.
And the surgeon said to take the shot.
Yeah.
And what's the big name for a person that does the cancer anyway?
Oncologist.
Yeah. She said to take it too.
Oh, yeah.
Because of her immune system.
Sure. Yeah, especially if your immune system is weakened or compromised, and your doctor advises it. That's something for you to think about.
Now, we can plead 91, but that's like somebody saying, I'm praying for you, Steve.
Yeah.
And walk on off.
And do nothing for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
We trust.
There's nothing wrong with putting our faith in God, but God's told us to use common sense too.
Yeah, we are to trust God. Like I heard one minister say that if his son had appendicitis and had to have his appendix removed, he said, I believe in praying for the sick, but I'd be praying in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Use common sense.
Yeah.
And if your faith is where you can walk on water and you don't need a physician, that's one thing. But don't tell somebody else that they can't go to a doctor. That's totally
Or
wrong.
that they can walk on water.
Yeah, don't tell them they can walk when they can't even swim. That might be dangerous. There's a full moon. The full conjunction occurs at 2:48 tomorrow. So that means there's going to look like there's a full moon tonight. It's going to look like there's a full moon tomorrow night. And Which brings me to something else about Passover. Well, maybe let me give you one more announcement. I'll get into that because people are wondering how sure are we of the date of Passover. Well, this year we can be really 100% sure, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. I just learned something else too. There was this thing online, a news announcement that archaeologists or geologists, scientists were stunned at what they had found up in Greenland. They dug down into the ice sheet, way down 1,400 feet, and then they went 15 feet under the actual ground. They were going to build some kind of a missile silo or something, and they found fossilized plants and twigs from trees. And they were stunned to find this out. All they had to do was listen to me. I've been saying that for years. I have been telling people for years, if you could go under the ice cap up there, you're going to find trees and plants and other things too. And I've also been saying this. Now, they haven't proved this yet. I hope they do in our lifetime so that you can say, yeah, okay, well, he did know about that. When they go under the ice caps, which is 2 miles thick in Antarctica, and they dig down into the dirt, they're going to find the same thing. I've been telling people that for years. So they finally announced this. They were stunned that they found, and it was fossilized. Now, if a plant just dies naturally, it rots. Or if you bury it naturally, to be fossilized, it's got to be buried suddenly. It's got to be buried suddenly. What caused it to be buried suddenly? Noah's flood. Up down here in North Carolina, it came down as rain. Up there, it came down as ice. So that ice sheet up there. You ever wonder why the glaciers are fresh water? They're not ocean water. They're fresh water. That's part of Noah's flood. Came down as rain. So if they ever dig down, and I encourage them to do it, in the ice cap at the South Pole, they're going to find fossilized trees and probably animals. And if they're lucky, they might find a human being that got buried suddenly. Under 2 miles of ice. So you can write that down. One day it'll happen, and you'll say, wow, isn't that amazing? No, it's just the Bible. The Bible tells us what happened. Here's what they said. Most ice sheets typically pulverize and destroy everything in their path, but what we discovered was delicate plant structures, perfectly preserved. Well, of course, they're fossils, but they look like they died yesterday. It's a time capsule of what used to live on Greenland that we wouldn't be able to find it anywhere else. Greenland was once green with moss, lichen, and maybe spruce and fir trees. And then they said this, and maybe one day will be again. Bottom line, fossilized plants found in the rocks and soil underneath the mile-thick Greenland ice sheet indicates that the ice melted at some point in the last 1,000,000 years and that it may do so again. Now they're talking about climate change. If the Greenland ice sheet were to melt entirely, it would raise global sea level by 20 feet. Well, this does not mean that it's going to melt and then go back. What that simply means is that 4,500 years ago, not millions of years, said it happened in the last 1,000,000 years. No, it happened 4,500 years ago. And when the flood came, it was ice, and it came down suddenly and buried those animals and plants and different things, and that's why they became fossilized. They'll find the same thing at the South Pole. You don't believe that now, maybe, but you just keep your eyes open, ears open. Maybe 10, 20 years from now before they finally actually try it and find out what's down there. Okay, that's all I want to share with you in the news. An overview on Passover today. What do we do? Now I know we last week we got into more of the spiritual aspects of Passover, but I'm getting a lot of questions, and they're good questions, and I'm glad I'm getting them from people about the technical aspects of Passover. What do we do if it's cloudy? What did Jesus do when it was cloudy and they couldn't see the new moon? Now, there's only one day that's in question, and that's the 29th day of the month. And if it's cloudy, what they did in Jesus' day, they automatically added the 30th day. They did that. Now Paul said all Scripture is profitable for doctrine. And what I want to do is I'm going to go back here to, I'm going to start in Exodus chapter 3. Paul said all doctrine, all Scripture is profitable for doctrine. So the question is, if all Scripture is profitable, then can we go to the Bible to find out where they added the 30th day if it was cloudy? And yes, we can. Let me, before I go to Exodus 3, let me just share a few more things with you. And you don't need to turn to Genesis, but we're told in the book of Genesis that the flood started on the 17th day of the second month, and it went till the 17th day of the 7th month. Now that's 5 months, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that time period was 150 days. The problem with that is, based on the lunar cycle, a lunar month cannot have more than 30 days and it cannot have less than 29. But in a 12-month period, 6 months will have 29 days and 6 months will have 30. But sometimes you may have 2 29 days in a month. Sometimes you may have 2 or 3 30 days in a month. So this would mean that there were 5 months with 30 days in them. But in actuality, out of those 5 months, at least 2 of them, and maybe 3 of them, had 29 days, which means there should have only been 147 to 148 days in that 5-month period. Should have been. But Noah said there were 150. What that means is if you divide 150 by 5 months, that means each month had 30 days. And so the Jews, even before Paul said, all scripture is profitable for doctrine, the Jews looked at that and said, well, of course, it was cloudy. He didn't get off the boat till the 10th. No, it was actually the 12th month. The water was finally gone by the 10th month, and it was still wet and everything, and they still stayed on actually a full year, like in maybe a week or so. And so it was cloudy, so what did Noah do when he couldn't see the new moon? He automatically added the 30th day. So in Jesus' day, according to history, that's how it was done also in the first century. Now, when I first, saw the problem with there being maybe clouds at the end of the 29th day, I said, well, look, we've got airplanes. We can go up above the clouds and see if there's a new moon up there. And somebody said, yeah, but Jesus, he didn't have airplanes, so what did he do? He followed that same rule. You automatically add the 30th day if it's cloudy. And so since Jesus never sinned, then that's how we should do it today. So if it was cloudy over in Jerusalem and they didn't see the new moon at the end of the 29th day, then they're going to automatically add the 30th, and then we keep Passover 14 days from that. Make sense? Now, here's some good news for you. I contacted the man who is the world's foremost authority on the biblical calendar. He's Jewish, and he became Christian. I actually met him back in the 70s. His name is Herbert Solinsky. He told me one time, some years ago, he said, my last name, Solinsky, means sun in the sky, and God has used me and given me understanding to understand the calendar, which has to do with the sun and the moon. But he has written paper after paper. He's written a book. I mean, the guy is an absolute scholar. So I contacted him and asked him about this particular new moon. Was it a borderline situation? There are 2 possibilities that we might be off a day for Passover. If the new crescent is at the horizon, it may not be seen. If it's borderline, it's iffy. The other possibility is if it's cloudy. Well, this year I asked him about this. He said, no, it's not a borderline. I sent him an email. He said, it's not a borderline situation this year. And secondly, this month, we can tell from astronomy, has 30 days in it. So even if it is cloudy, the night they're looking for the new moon, it makes no difference. So therefore, we have 100%, not 98 or 99% possibility, but 100% possibility, or 100% absolute knowledge that the Passover day will be the 27th of April, which means the night before Monday night we'll be observing the Passover communion right here. Those of you who are baptized by immersion, please be here, because God tells us to do this in remembrance of Him.
And bring a basin and a towel.
And bring a plastic basin and a towel. We're going to do what John 13 says too. Any questions on what I've covered? So that's good news. So on the 13th of April, what's that, 3 weeks away now? Go out there and look in the west just after sundown. Within 15 to 20 minutes, you'll see a little sliver of the moon. That's when the month begins on the biblical calendar. And that'll be the first new moon of spring, which means it's Abib first, and then 14 days later is Passover. So I want to share that with you. All right, now, since Jesus never contradicted that rule, and He did it, we should too. Mark chapter 7, don't turn there, but Jesus said, you've laid aside the commandment of God to hold your own tradition. The Jews have laid aside the entire biblical calendar to follow a calendar invented in the 4th century by a man named Hillel, who was the Jewish rabbi, the main Jewish rabbi at that time. And so in order to follow that calendar, you have to totally dispense with the rules of the biblical calendar. Now, About it being cloudy, since 1983, when I first learned and really did I spent 300 hours studying the calendar, I have only known it to be cloudy one time when they couldn't see the new moon. So it's very, very seldom that it ever is. All right, now you found Exodus 3. By the way, Dr. Souls couldn't be here today, so you got me for the whole time. Hope that's okay.
Oh, there's a question.
Okay, I'll take the question.
Don't we have to wait for the confirmation by seeing the crescent in Jerusalem?
Yeah, we can scientifically calculate when the new moon occurs, but it's still got to be verified by observation. Deuteronomy 16 verse 1 says, if you read it in the Hebrew text, observe the new moon. You got to observe it and keep the Passover.
Oh, if you can't see it.
Well, if you can't see it, you had one more day. See, the only time you have to observe it is the 29th.
Okay.
They will go out and look at it the
So
next
if you
night.
can't see it on the 30th, it don't.
It doesn't matter because you can't have more than 30 days in a lunation. So the only night you're actually looking at it is the 29th.
Okay.
And by the way, there's only 2 new moons in the whole year we have to worry about. The new moon of Abib to keep the spring holy days, and the new moon of trumpets to keep the fall holy days. That's the only one those are the only 2 I pay attention to. The rest of them, you can pay attention to them for the fun of it if you want to. Okay, so Exodus 3, verse 18. This is an interesting statement. What does this have to do with Passover? They shall hearken to your voice, and you shall come, telling Moses that Israel will come and listen to you, and the elders of Israel to the king of Egypt. And you shall say to the king, the eternal God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us go, we beseech you, 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the eternal our God. Now why do they need to do that? Chapter 5 and verse 1. Moses and Aaron went in, told Pharaoh, thus says the eternal God of Israel, let my people go, that we may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. That's what God was saying. What was this feast? Now, that doesn't mean that if Pharaoh had said, okay, go ahead and go, that exactly, they'd leave that night, 3 days now, they'd have the feast. Probably they would have taken a couple of weeks. This was getting very, very soon here before Passover. It's very likely that this feast was the feast of the first month. But they're in the 12th or 13th month here, probably the 12th month, and they're telling Pharaoh, we've got a feast that we've got to observe to God. But Pharaoh said, no, you can't do it. Don't assume that they would have had the feast 3 days from today, once they told Pharaoh, if he'd said, go ahead and go. The feast was a couple of weeks off yet, apparently. It would have taken time to have gotten ready. Is it not possible that before the name Passover was given to this feast, that this was the same identical feast, maybe under a different name? It's very possible. How did Moses know about this feast? You know, some people think that all the laws didn't exist until Moses gave them. And yet Joseph said to Potiphar's wife, how can I commit this sin? What sin? Transgression of the law. The law existed. The 10 Commandments existed. You remember Moses killed an Egyptian. That was considered murder. Cain killed his brother way back just on this side of the Garden of Eden, and that was considered murder. In fact, the first place you see sin is right there when Cain killed Abel. The word sin is used in chapter 3 of Genesis. So the law existed. What about Cain and Abel bringing first fruits to God? We consider that a Mosaic ordinance. Well, it's given by Moses, but apparently they knew about it in the Garden of Eden. If they knew about first fruits, they knew about tithing. Also, you know, Adam had to become a farmer after he got thrown out. Don't you think that God explained to Adam, look, don't work your soil but 6 years. You got to let it rest one, or else you're going to wear out the soil. So obviously, long before Moses was ever born, obviously, during that first 3,000 years, God must have told people about letting their land rest, and possibly about a jubilee every 50 years. We should not assume that the laws didn't exist just because God doesn't tell us in Genesis to do them. He tells us in Exodus and Leviticus. What more do you need? So it's very possible that the Passover did not represent Israel coming out of Egypt. And it wasn't called Passover. We don't know what it might have been called. But whatever it was, this might have been the same feast. And they knew it was coming up. And Moses tells Pharaoh, we got to go. We got to go 3 days out there to do it. Something interesting about that too. To keep God's feasts, you got to come out of the world. Pharaoh said, do it right here in Egypt. No, we can't do it here. That'd be an abomination to God. The only people who can keep God's feast days are people who leave the world, and you got to come out of the world. What does it say in 2 Corinthians 6? Come out and be you separate, says the Lord. You got to come out and be separate from the world.
Question on that.
We have another question? Okay.
Carolyn is asking, the first place of sin wasn't when Eve and Adam disobeyed? Question.
The word sin appears first in relation to Cain in chapter 3. Yeah, it was a sin when Adam and Eve ate the fruit, but the word sin is not used there. So in chapter 8 of Exodus and verse 26, well, verse 25, Pharaoh called for Moses and said, "Go sacrifice to your God, but do it in the land." Moses said, "It's not meet or fitting to do so, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and they'll stone us. No," verse 27, "we're going to go 3 days' journey." Now he's not asking, he's telling. "And sacrifice to the Lord our God as he shall command us." So he had to tell him what the score was. Now, you remember when they came out of Egypt, it was 400 and some years. If you go to a couple of pages over in Exodus, to chapter 12 and verse 40, the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day. So it's kind of like, I saw you last year on a Tuesday, on this day of the month, to the day. That means exactly 365 days ago. So 430 years ago, to the day they came out of Egypt. Now, there's a significance in that. It's exactly, in other words, it'd be like if they came out of Egypt, say on, I'll just say January the 1st, it'd be exactly 430 years ago that was January the 1st. But yet, when you go back 400 years before Moses, you don't come to Israel being in slavery. You go back to the time of Abraham. Abraham sojourned in Egypt for a while. So did Isaac. And so the 430 years don't go back to the time of slavery. Some scholars say they may have only been in slavery 50 to 100 years at best. 50 years is a whole generation. That'd have been a long time. But the 400 years go back to Abraham. In fact, if you look at the date at the top of the page, and if you're using Usher's dates, it says 1491. All right? So then you go back to Genesis 15, and you look at the date at the top of the page. 15, verse, well, it doesn't matter what verse it is. Look at the top of the page. Here it says it's 1900 and something. So 14 from 19, you're looking at, it was almost 1500. But you're looking at least 400 years there. Now, we're in chapter 15, look at verse 9. Well, God had promised Abraham he and his descendants would inherit this land. Verse 7, "I am the Lord that brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land." Verse 8, he said, "Lord God, whereby or how shall I know that I'll inherit it?" So God made a covenant. And verse 9, he says, this is interesting. "Take a heifer, take a she-goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." That's all 5 sacrifices mentioned in the book of Leviticus. There are only 5 animals. You cannot offer up a chicken or a deer. You have to offer up one of those 5 offerings. And all 5 of them were used to set up the Abrahamic covenant. Now, the word covenant, berith, in Hebrew means to divide the pieces, to cut the pieces. And they cut the pieces, it says in verse 10, they divided them, and then God walks right through the midst of the pieces, and that's how they set up a covenant. But verse 13, he said to Abram, "Know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that's not theirs, and shall serve them. They shall afflict them 400 years. But that only goes back to the time of Abraham. And so scholars teach this, and I have no reason to disagree with it, that they were only in slavery maybe 50 to 100 years, but the 400 years, because technically Abraham was considered afflicted up to a point. Remember, he was scared for his life. Isaac was down there scared for his life. And then finally Jacob comes down, and Jacob and his family then live there. And of course, then they begin to afflict them more and more until they finally put them in slavery. So 400 years, actually technically it's 430. Now notice this also. Verse 16, but in the fourth generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. The iniquity is not all that bad, so I can't let you take the Amorites' land away from them. They're still good people. But once their iniquity gets so bad that they don't deserve to live here anymore, then your descendants will come in the fourth generation. Now, people ask the question, how long is a generation? Some people say a generation is 40 years, but you look in the Bible, a generation can be 30, it can be 50, so they average it out to 40. But here, when people live more than 70 years, Abraham died at 175, and Isaac lived, I think, older than that. So some people think that 120 was life expectancy. No, that was 120 years before, between the time God told Noah to build the ark and before the flood came. That was the 120 years. Nowhere does the Bible say 120 is how long you can expect to live. Psalm 90 says 70 to 80. And of course, if you keep your health up, you can live to be in your 90s. My folks live to be in their 90s. I'm going to outdo them and live to be 100. But I think Jesus may come back long before that. I hope so. He may very well. So a generation then would have been 100 years. So he said, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back into the land. And the fourth generation. So in other words, 400 years from now. Any questions? So, did Abraham keep the Passover under a different name? For the self-same day. The self-same day. Now look at verse 18. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto your seed I've given this land. The self-same day, 430 years later to the day, they came out. When did they come out? On the 15th of the month of Abib. That's apparently when God made the covenant with Abraham. Fascinating stuff that you don't hear in a lot of churches because they don't dig that deep. But there it is if you study it thoroughly. Now, while we're here, I'm going to go back to, I don't need to ask you to turn to it, but I'll tell you what it says. In Exodus 12, verse 14, God said the Passover is forever. It's very possible then that it goes back even before the time of Moses, and it will continue after Jesus returns the second time. So the Passover was not abolished at the cross. It is forever. Now Jesus said in Mark 2:27, the Sabbath was made for man. The Greek word there means mankind. If the weekly Sabbath was made for man, how about all those annual Sabbaths? Well, you read in Zechariah 14, verses 16 through 19, that all nations will be keeping these feast days. So the Sabbath and the annual Sabbaths, they were all made for mankind, not just for the Jews. Also in Exodus 12:49, while I'm here in Exodus, I'll read this to you. Exodus 12:49 says, one law shall be to him that is homeborn, and to the stranger is the Gentile. So we're all supposed to keep the same laws God gave to Israel. All right, any questions over some of those Old Testament scriptures? I'll mention one more, then I want to go to Luke 22. So if you're reading along with me, you might want to go to Luke, because I've got several scriptures to give you in the New Testament. But before I turn there, let me tell you what Ezekiel 45, verse 21 says. In the millennium, it says, you shall have the Passover, and there's a comma there, a feast of 7 days. Passover is not the name of the preparation day. The New Testament calls the 14th the preparation day. Passover is actually the name of a 7-day feast. And that's why the Jews call the 15th of Abib the first day of Passover. And when I first looked at that on the calendar, I said, why do they call it the first day? It's only one day to Passover, because I had been taught that Passover was only the 14th day. No, the Passover, according to Ezekiel 45, verse 21, is a 7-day feast. So what we're keeping, according to John 13:1, is the feast of the Passover when we're keeping the 7 days of unleavened bread. Now, you don't get this in any Protestant church. I don't know of a single Protestant church on planet Earth that teaches us to keep the annual feast days. But when Christ returns, it says all flesh, red and yellow, black and white, Japanese, Chinese, Russians, Europeans, everybody will be keeping these holy days. Now, the reason we want to keep them now is for 2 reasons. One, to show our love to God. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. But number 2, if we are keeping God's commandments now and learning it enough that we can teach others, and we're teaching others. You can share it with your family and different people every chance you get. Explain this to them. Learn it first and then teach people, where the day will come when Christ returns and sets up his government, his kingdom, a literal government. Then you can have a reward and you can continue teaching it then. I plan to teach this for the next 1,000 years. And you should too. People think the reward is to go to heaven. Ask the average Baptist Methodist, ask him, what is the reward of the saved? Go to heaven. What do you do when you get there? I don't know. So heaven itself is the reward. Well, what if you get there and you don't particularly like the mansion you got? It's too big, it's too much to dust. I mean, what is the reward? Eternal retirement? I got a better reward than you got. My house is bigger. I got 14 rooms. You only got 13. I got a bigger reward than you got, but I got more to dust. Or maybe you want a bigger halo or larger angel's wings. I mean, it's stupid. The childishness that so many Christians have these days about what the reward is. The reward is a place. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you. Look it up in the lexicon. He's going to prepare a position for you in his government. And he tells you in Luke 19, some may rule over 5 cities. Some may rule over 10. The apostles rule over probably hundreds. They're going to be over 1 tribe. And David's going to be over all 12. He'll be ruling over thousands. Your reward is a position in God's kingdom. Any questions on that? I know you haven't heard that in Protestant churches, and I have never heard it either. Right there it is in the Bible. All right, have you found the book of Luke? I told you Luke 22, didn't I? I made a mistake. We'll go to Luke 22 later. I want to go to Luke 2 first of all. That's the second mistake I've made this year, but that's not too bad. This is March. I forget what the first one was, but anyway, that's only the second one. Okay, so Luke 2, verse 41. Now, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. Now, the 14th is not a feast day, it's a preparation day. It's a big work day. I know I've done it for many years. It's a big, big work day. But the feast of the Passover starts at the end of the 14th and the beginning of the 15th. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, plural. Well, now, if the Passover is only the 14th, how could they fulfill the days, plural, of Passover? Because it's a 7-day feast. Then they returned, and the child Jesus tarried behind, and they went back to get him. And he was in the temple asking questions of the doctors, and hearing them and asking them questions. He's trying to learn all he could about the law of God from the experts. Verse 47, and the doctors of the law who heard him were astonished at his understanding and his answers, to have only been 12 years old. All right, now I want to go to Luke 22 and verse 1. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh. Now notice the translators did not put a capital F on the word feast, or a capital U or a B on unleavened bread, because that's not the official name. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called, and now they put a capital letter on it. So what is the official name of the feast of unleavened bread? Passover. If you believe the Bible. And there are churches out there that will tell you, oh no, Passover is your first feast, then unleavened bread is your second feast. No. This shows here that the feast, the days of unleavened bread, those 7 days, are properly called the Passover. Now, if you just take the Bible at face value, there it is. Now, verse 15, Jesus said, with desire, I've desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I will not any more eat thereof till the kingdom comes. Do you realize that when he offered them the bread and the wine, he didn't take it? Here, take this. This is my body. But he didn't eat it. Here, drink this. This is my blood. But he didn't do it. He's not going to do that, or however we're going to be doing that in the millennium. He's not going to do anything like that till it's fulfilled in the kingdom. What about the Passover lamb? Now, this is where we get into some controversy. Some people teach that the Passover lamb must have been killed on that Tuesday night, because Jesus died on Wednesday, we know that. So this was a Tuesday night, and so they think that the proper time for killing of the lamb should have been Tuesday night. Well, when did the Jews kill it? On the afternoon of the 14th. Jesus is called our Passover. When did he die? On the afternoon of the 14th. So if the proper time for killing the lamb was Tuesday evening. Jesus missed it by a whole day practically. What's the question?
Our friend Patty is asking, what about the night to be much remembered?
Yeah, the night to be much observed, mentioned in chapter 12 of Exodus, was the night at the end of the 14th, the beginning of the 15th, when they were eating the lamb. Because Deuteronomy 16 says you are to kill the Passover lamb at the going down of the sun. It's not when you eat it that is near as important as when the sacrifice was made. The sacrifice was made mid-afternoon. Now Josephus, who was born in the 30s of the first century, he actually saw the temple, grew up around it. He was there when the destruction occurred. Josephus said the way that they offered the Passover lamb, they did it on the 14th between the 9th and the 11th hours using Roman time. That's 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Now, if that had been wrong, Jesus should have said, hey guys, you're doing it all wrong. He never once did that. Plus, Jesus grew up in a Jewish home. That's all he had ever seen. Now, you're going to tell me that Jesus sinned, you see. So the night to be much observed was when they were actually eating the Passover lamb. That's why it's a night to be much observed, because God delivered them out of Egypt, starting with the Passover lamb. They had to put the lamb's blood on the door.
Do some folks teach that that's a high day?
It is a high day.
But, okay.
The eve of the 15th at sundown begins the high day. So they didn't eat the lamb until that night. Now, some people say, no, they would have eaten it the night before, because Jesus said, I've desired to eat this Passover with you. Yeah, he desired. All those years, Jesus had eaten the Passover lamb. He said, guys, I've really been looking forward to this. They were all looking forward to it. He said, but I won't do it again till it's in the kingdom. They didn't know what he meant. So the next night, when they ate the Passover lamb, where was Jesus? He was buried. He was in the tomb. So he did not get to eat the Passover lamb that year. But he had his entire life, from the time at least he was 12 years old. Questions? See, this is an overview of Passover because people still have questions about it. Well, why do we take communion on the eve of the 14th? Because this was something brand new that never existed before, and Jesus was instituting what we call communion, because 1 Corinthians 10 calls it communion. He instituted this communion celebration as part of the Passover. It had never existed in Moses' day. Where did they get together at the beginning of the 14th and take bread and wine and do foot washing? They never did that. That's something all brand new. What they would do is they came to the 14th day, and if you go back to, I think it's 2 Chronicles 35, just have to think about it. Josiah, on the 14th day, killed over 41,000 animals. They couldn't have done that after sundown the night before, because if you read on down the chapter, it says, but they stopped when it got night. So from sundown on the 14th until night, I've counted it. In April, it's about 15 minutes. No more than 20. You get into June, it's longer, it's around 25 minutes. So I've tested it year after year. So in 15 minutes, they offered 41,000 sacrifices with one altar? No, it was the daytime. And one minister told me, he says, well, Josiah was wrong in doing it that way. Well, then you back up a few verses, and it says that Josiah began to reign, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. So what Josiah did was right, to offer sacrifices in the daylight portion of the 14th. So did Jesus die on the right date? Yes, he did. Did he die at the right hour? Over and over and over and over. He said, my hour has not yet come. But now his hour had come. He died at the exact right hour. Now I know a lot of this is review. Hopefully you've heard it over and over where it's coming out of your ears. Now you go out and teach others. That's how you get a great reward in God's kingdom. Any questions? Now let's go back to Matthew 26, if you're turning with me, or you can just listen. Matthew 26, and in verse 17. Now the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, where will you that we prepare for you to eat the Passover? Pretty awkward wording. Why is that awkward? Because technically the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is the 15th. And then they come to him and said, now where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? They would have eaten it the night before. All right, I'll take it in just a moment. They didn't wait till the 15th to eat the lamb. They ate the lamb the night before. Now, in the Greek, a lot of times you see in your King James Bible italics, because it's not there in the Greek, but they have to put that in there. Take out the italicized words here for just a moment. Now, the first of the unleavens is what it says in Greek. It was approaching the first day of unleavened bread, but it wasn't the exact first day, but they were approaching it. And so probably about the 10th day or 11th day, they said, hey, we got the lamb now. They had to get the lamb on the 10th day. That was always the day they selected the lamb. Where do you want us to eat the Passover? So they were approaching the first day. But some people think that they killed the lamb on the 15th. No, they didn't. If that's true, there again, you got a problem. Jesus died on the wrong day. Because he died on the 14th. Okay, what's the question?
Please go back to prior, because there's like a 10-15 second delay. Our friend Rod Kuzman said, I think you're right. I get weary over this endless debate over the 14th and the 15th.
Yeah.
And then Bill Linton says, 22:8 causes me to wonder.
Chapter 22 of Matthew?
Luke, I guess, or
Oh.
was it Matthew? Bill, is it Luke or Matthew?
So does everybody understand?
You were in Luke 22 before, so maybe it is 22 Luke.
Okay.
Because, with that delay, the questions come in late.
Yeah. Let's see. I think he's talking about Luke 22:8. Yeah. Go and prepare us the Passover that we may eat. So they did prepare it, and they got it ready. But now you have to understand something. They started having festive meals from the 10th day all the way until probably just after the 21st. According to Josephus, they had over 1 million people in Jerusalem. They came in there for the feast by the busloads, so to speak. They were in there, man, there were millions of, well, not millions, but hundreds of thousands of people from other countries that came to celebrate the Passover. And so the 10th day, they had to get there no later than the 10th day because they had to select the lamb on the 10th day. They couldn't do it on the 14th day. So, you know how a lot of people are late these days, going to places, late for church, late for class or whatever. They couldn't be late. They couldn't wait till the 14th day because they didn't have lamb. So they had to be there no later than the 10th day to select the lamb. So what they had was people out there with sheep that you could buy one, and they'd go through the flocks of the country, pick out perfect sheep, bring them to a pen. All these are perfect. Now select your Passover. Okay, I want that one. So they would buy their Passover lambs when they got to Jerusalem. So what did they do that night? They got together with their friends that they hadn't seen since last year, and had, with friends and relatives. So they had a big festive meal on the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th. And that's why Jesus got together with his disciples. They were having these big meals at that time, the whole time, for about 2 weeks. But they haven't eaten the Passover lamb till the next day. Because Deuteronomy 16 is very explicit at the going down of the sun. If you look that up in Hebrew, the Hebrew word is B-O-W there for going down. And it shows, according to the Hebrew lexicon, progression in movement. So the sun is moving in the sky. Not set, because you can't see it moving. The sun is moving. Now the sun is going up at sunrise, and it keeps going up until noon. And at noon, high noon, whatever time that is on daylight savings time, but it's always going to be high noon, then it starts going down. So the sun's going down at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, all the way to sunset. So at the going down of the sun is when they were to kill the Passover. When did our Passover die? At the going down of the sun. So don't let people deceive you and say, oh, no, Jesus died on the wrong day. Not true. Not true. Any other questions? Okay, so we're in Matthew 26. And
Jay made a comment, the original spring break.
the original spring break, that's right. Good point. So verse 17, it was approaching the first day of unleavened bread. Where do you want us to do that? Now, this is what throws people off. They say, Jesus must have eaten the lamb. Verse 18, the master says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house. Now, you have to understand, if the Passover is the 14th, then Jesus told a lie right here. And that's why people say, well, maybe they did eat the lamb a night early. When you understand the definition of Passover, it's a 7-day feast. Let me ask you, did Jesus keep the Passover that year? He kept what he could of it. But he was dead for the first 3 days. Did Jesus eat unleavened bread for 7 days that year? Nope. Dead people don't eat bread. Think about that. So Christ desired to be with them for the whole feast. All he could do is institute this brand new communion ordinance. The next day he died, And it wasn't until the wave sheaf that he was back out, and then he could eat unleavened bread. Remember, he went to the disciples and said, "You got anything to eat?" Well, they would have only had unleavened bread. They could have had fish and honeycomb, but no leavened bread. Any questions? Now, in verse 19, they made ready the Passover. Then verse 26 says they were eating. This was apparently just a common meal. They took bread, and he took bread, blessed it. He said, "Now take, eat, this is my body." Verse 27, he took the cup and he gave thanks. He said, "Drink all of it." Verse 28, "This is the blood of the new covenant," as your margin correctly says, "which is shed for many for the remission of sins." But I'm not going to participate in this Passover until it's new in the kingdom of God. Until I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. I won't do it until it's in my Father's kingdom. You do it, but I say to you, I will not. Verse 29 is very obvious. Here, you do this, but I'm not going to do it. I've desired to do this, but I won't do it until we get into the kingdom. Y'all see that? How plain that is. Now, I want to go to Mark 14. Here's some more awkward wording, which throws people off. Because, the Greek is a foreign language, and we're translating it sometimes is a bit awkward. Mark 14 and verse 12. "And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover." Well, here was a good place for them to put the italicized word "approaching." And approaching the first day of unleavened bread when they killed the Passover. They did not kill the Passover on the 15th. However, they killed it a few hours before the 15th at the going down of the sun, and they ate it that night on the eve of the 15th. So they said, where will you that we go and prepare that you may eat? And he told them. So, any questions on that? Now, there are some other things. Let's see, verse 23 here. Let me read that to you as well. He took the cup when he given thanks. He said, "This is my blood of the new covenant." Verse 25, "Verily I say to you, I will drink no more of the fruit of the vine till that day I drink it new in the kingdom of God." Now, in the book of John, we've got some questions that people have. It's raised some eyebrows to Christians who keep God's holy days. John 2. What did Jesus mean when he talked about or not just Jesus, but John, when he wrote this, a feast of the Jews? All right, John 2 and verse 13. "And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went to Jerusalem." So a lot of people read that and say, well, that's just a Jewish feast, but we don't keep it as Christians. But now, you can read Eusebius, the early church, we know historically, for a fact, kept Passover. But remember John 16:1, Jesus said they're going to put you out of the synagogues, and they did. So the way Christians observe Passover and the way the Jews did it are not the same. First of all, remember I said there was probably a feast that wasn't called Passover that existed before Moses was even born. What did that feast represent? We don't know. It's not important for you to know. Well, now the Old Testament Passover, what does that represent? They came out of Egypt. That was when they were liberated. What does the New Testament Passover picture to Christians? Christ. Same feast, different meaning. So this feast that Moses wanted to go out and celebrate, it's going to take a 3-day journey to get to where we got it. Totally come out of the world to do God's holy days. We're going to keep a feast to the Lord. But Pharaoh kept saying no, but they still got to celebrate it at the right time. But they had to leave Egypt, didn't they? They went ahead and killed the lamb, but then they left Egypt immediately. But to a Christian, we don't say Passover pictures the Israelites leaving Egypt. It does. Under the Old Covenant, under the New Covenant, all we talk about is Jesus. Jesus is our Passover. He is our new covenant. So you see, this feast may have had at least 3 different meanings. Something that a lot of people look over and don't understand. Verse 23, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover in the feast," now they added the word day in italics. It just says in the feast in Greek. So it's sometime during that 7-day period, many believed in his name when they saw the miracles that he did. John chapter 6. As I said, this raises questions for people. John chapter 6 and verse 4. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. Again, the way the Jews did it and the way Christians do it is different. The way the Jews do it, they come together, select a lamb, kill the lamb, and have the night to be much observed. That's how they did it. Christians, we don't do that. We take the communion, and then we have the days of unleavened bread. We don't even kill the lamb. Now, it wouldn't be wrong if you're living in Jerusalem when they have a temple there, but anywhere else in the world you can't do that. When Paul told the Greeks in Corinth to keep the Passover, he didn't say anything about killing a lamb, did he? They couldn't do that in Greece. John 11 and verse 55. And the Jews' Passover was nigh at hand. The way they did it was different from the way the Christians did it. Many went out of the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. We don't need to do that. We've already been baptized. We don't need to do that. Another question? Okay, I'll take it.
Rod, it's more of a comment, but it might be a question.
Okay.
Rod says Passover in tabernacles is out of Egypt if you read Leviticus.
Well, it has to do, yeah, because they stayed tabernacles pictures when they were in the wilderness for 40 years during that time, living in tabernacles. And that is the old covenant understanding. Then you come to, and all Christians agree with this. I've even heard Pat Robertson teach that Feast of Tabernacles to the Christian pictures the millennial reign of Christ, not Israelites living in tabernacles. So yeah, so there again, you have different meanings for these holy days. Now in John 12 and verse 1, this is interesting. Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, and they had a supper. Verse 2, they had a supper for him. What day of the week was this, and what day of the month was it? Well, now remember, John, in his way of thinking, he's not thinking about the 14th. He's thinking about the feast of the Passover. Look at chapter 13, verse 1. I'll prove it to you. Now, before the feast of the Passover, all right? So the feast of the Passover started on a Thursday. Christ died on Wednesday. The high day was Thursday. That was the first day of the feast, okay? Now go back to chapter 12, 6 days before the feast. That's what he's talking about. Now let's figure it out. Thursday's your high day. 6 days before that, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Friday. It was a Friday, and Mary and Martha said, hey, come to our house tonight for Sabbath evening meal. That's what it was, a Sabbath evening meal. So that's what Jesus did. This was his last Sabbath meal before his crucifixion. And remember, Mary took the oil and poured on him, and Judas got upset about it, and Jesus said, she's doing this for my burial, because in just a few days, Jesus would be buried. He knew this. This was his last evening meal. Now, let's figure it out. 15th, you want to go back 6 days? 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9 is 6 days. So this was the 9th day of Abib. Now look at verse 12. On the next day, that'd be the 10th day of Abib, much people that were come to the feast, when they heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, they took branches of palm trees, and they went forth to meet him. And notice what they said, Hosanna, blessed is the King. Now they accepted Jesus as their Messiah. Messiah refers to the King. He is the King of Israel that comes in the name of the Lord. So that was the day they accepted Jesus. The whole town of Jerusalem accepted him at that time. The Pharisees said in verse 19, perceive you how you prevail nothing. The whole world has gone after him. So that's when all the Jews accepted him. Now, when do you kill the Passover lamb? You have to select it on the 10th day. Jesus said, I've come to fulfill the law and the prophets. On the 10th day, when they're out there looking for the perfect spotless lamb, Jesus rides into Jerusalem, and they accept him. 4 days later, they killed that sheep. 4 days later, Christ died as our lamb. How did he fulfill the law? Same identical way. Now, after he died, he was in the tomb 3 days, exactly. 3 days and 3 nights, which means he could not have risen on Sunday morning. That had been 4 nights. He died on Wednesday. He was resurrected 3 days and 3 nights later, and according to the records, the Levitical records of the first century, called the House of Boethus, or the family of Boethus, though both Boethusian records are still extant today, and they said that there was 2 parts to the wave sheaf. The first part, they harvested the wave sheaf at sundown, Saturday evening. Christ rose from the dead at that time. The next morning, at the morning offering, which was about 9 o'clock, the high priest waved it, showing that God had accepted the first of the first fruits. 1 Corinthians 15 says Jesus is the first of the first fruits. And check any commentary. The wave, sheaf, pictures Jesus. He fulfilled the law by being accepted on the 10th day, dying on the 14th at the exact hour. He was resurrected at the exact hour when they harvested the wave sheaf. Deuteronomy 16:9, when you put the sickle to the corn, it says, or to the standing grain, Hebrews says. Then he waited around. He didn't go directly to heaven. He hung around. The next morning, Mary shows up before they offered the wave sheaf. Hey, don't touch me, don't touch me. I haven't yet ascended to my Father. But after the high priest waved the sheaf later that afternoon, he said, okay, now go ahead and touch me. Go ahead, touch me. Feel the holes in my hands. You see, Christ fulfilled it perfectly. The day of Pentecost, 7 weeks later, Christ fulfilled that too by sending the Holy Spirit. But now he has not fulfilled the Feast of Trumpets. Has not been fulfilled. Any questions? Got a question there? Okay.
More
What
of
is
a
it?
statement than a question you might want to. Rod said John confused things by having palm branches. I'm not exactly sure.
I don't know what he means by that John confused things by having palm branches.
They came from Jericho,
The palm branches came from Jericho?
probably.
I don't know.
It's close by.
Not too far away, yeah. I don't know exactly.
A lot of people worry about the palm bridges.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
For Palm Sunday, I guess it's all in the
Well,
name.
Palm Sunday is the day that commemorates this event.
Yeah, but I've even heard pastors say there wasn't any palm trees around.
Well, there are today.
Well, Jericho had them. It was known as.
Yeah. Well, they've got them today in Jerusalem. They've got palm trees over there. So, I don't know. I haven't actually been there. Now, John 13:1 talks about that this all happened before the Passover. And he's writing under inspiration. So what Jesus did with the communion thing was before the Passover. It was one whole day before the Passover feast began and before they killed the lamb. Let me see here. John 13:28 says, no, that's wrong. I got that wrong there. No, it's chapter 18, verse 12. That's where it should be. So in 18, verse 12, it says, they bound Jesus, and they took him out, they arrested him, and then that was when he died at that time on the 14th, not on the 13th, but on the 14th. So he was arrested. Now, now I've got chapter 13, verse 28. I don't know if that's correct or not. No, I made a mistake there. It must be 18. Yeah, 18:28, not 13. 18:28. Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas to the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves didn't go into the judgment hall lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Now this is the next day after Christ had communion. They still had not eaten the Passover yet. It was that night at the end of the 14th. And then chapter 19, verse 31, the Jews, because it was the preparation, that's when Christ died, the 14th on the preparation day, that the body should not remain on the cross, for that Sabbath was a high day. So it started at sundown. It was not Saturday, it was an annual Sabbath, not the weekly Sabbath. It was a high day. And we know in that particular year it was Thursday. According to the U.S. Naval Observatory, that was a Thursday. Now, let me read just a few more things. I want to go to 1 Corinthians 11. Chapter 11 in verse 1. Paul made a very famous statement. It's very well known today. He said, be followers of me, even I also am of Christ. Christ kept the Passover. Do you think Paul did? He did for two reasons. Well, he did for three reasons. One, God says that even the strangers, not only the Israelites, but even the strangers keep Passover. But a second reason was, Christ kept it. He said, I'm following him. I'm imitating him. The Greek word for follower is imitator. Be imitators of me as I also am of Christ. So he had to keep the Passover. And another reason was he was Pharisee, and all Pharisees kept the holy days. So, of course, he kept Passover. Now, he said, now you follow me. He's talking to Greek Gentile Christians who are still learning these things, just like many people in America here. This is all new information. And some of you watching by the internet, this may be all new information for you. So Paul said, well, just follow me as I follow Christ. You'll be okay. Christ kept the holy days. Paul did too. Then he talks about what we're supposed to do at the time of the Passover. 23, verse 23, I have received of the Lord which I delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. He said, take, eat, this is my body. So he's teaching them to do this. Verse 26, for as often as you eat this bread, drink this cup, you're showing the Lord's death till he come. When do we stop doing this? Not until he come. And then Jesus said, and then in the kingdom, it'll be fulfilled. We'll be doing it then. It'll be a constant fulfillment every year for 1,000 years. Now, 1 Corinthians 4, I'm just about done here, but let me just talk about the fact that Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 7-day feast. And in chapter 4, verse 18, according to scholars, according to your commentaries, according to theologians, 1 Corinthians was written at the time in springtime as they were approaching Passover. Verse 18, now some are puffed up as though I would not come to you. Why would he use an expression like that? Because bread puffs up with leavening. Now, chapter 5, verse 1, it's reported commonly among you that there's sin in the church. Verse 2, and you are puffed up, he uses it again, and have not rather mourned that he that has done this thing should be taken away. Why is he using that expression? It's a Passover expression representing leavened bread. Then he says in verse 6, your glorying is not good. Don't you know a little leaven leavens or puffs up the whole lump? Therefore, purge out this sin, purge out that old leaven, that you may be a new lump. Metaphorically, you're not a lump of bread, you're a human being, but it's a metaphor. Then he says that you may be a new lump as you are, present tense, unleavened. And now, according to the scholars, Pauline scholars, Coney Barrenhausen, they said that it is obvious, and we know from history of the first church, they were physically unleavened. So Paul says when you are physically unleavened during Passover, also get rid of the sin out of your life. Purge out that old leaven, that spiritual leaven. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let's keep the feast. It's talking about Hanukkah? No. It's talking about Purim? No. What feast? Passover. Let's keep the feast. Today's churches say, oh, that was all done away. Why is it? Look at the date at the top of the page. Mine says AD 59. You're looking at almost 30 years after the cross, and Paul is telling the Gentiles, let's keep the feast, because Christ is our Passover. They didn't keep Easter. The Encyclopedia Britannica, if you look up the Encyclopedia Britannica, look under the article Easter, it will tell you they never celebrated Easter in the first few centuries of the church. The feast he's talking about here is Passover. Now, in conclusion, I want to read you one more scripture here. Colossians 2:16 is one of the greatest proofs that the early church continued to keep the holy days. It's one of the greatest proofs. Colossians 2, but before I go to 16, I want to go back to verse 4. Now, remember, there was no synagogue in Colossae. They didn't have enough Jews in Colossae to even have a synagogue. Most cities today in America have churches. Kannapolis has bunches. Concord has bunches. Every city of any size in America has at least a church in it. Well, they had synagogues all over Europe at that time. But Colossae didn't have any. Not a single synagogue, because they didn't have enough Jews. Beware lest any man should beguile you with enticing words. What men? The Gentile neighbors and family and their community. So Gentiles can beguile you. Verse 8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy. Now, what was the number one philosophy in that day? Go back and study the history. It was Greek philosophy. They were students of Plato. It was a major thing in that day and time. So beware of Greek philosophy. Dr. Roller mentioned that I think the guy's name was Athenagoras. In the early days, he said, I won't teach Christianity unless I can mix it in with Greek philosophy. They loved Greek philosophy. Paul said, don't do that. After the tradition of men, not after Christ, these traditions are wrong. Then he said in verse 18, let no man beguile you of your reward. Be careful about following men, and be careful who you follow. So it's all about these Gentile men. Now we come to verse 16. Let no man, therefore, judge you in, the King James says, meat and drink. The Greek says, and brosai in posai, which means in eating and in drinking. Now, everybody did that this morning. Y'all had breakfast, I would imagine. But don't let men judge you in what you eat and drink. Does that say that's done away? No, he's not abolishing food and drink. He says just don't let somebody judge you in food or drink, what you eat or drink, or in respect of a holy day. Where'd that come from? They must have been observing them, or the new moon. Now remember, they had the Roman calendar since long before the birth of Jesus. They had the Roman calendar. Julius Caesar invented it, but it doesn't use the new moon. Why does he mention the new moon? Because these Christians have now learned, don't just go by the January through December calendar that we have. Go by the new moon to start your months. Now, that's only necessary if you're going to keep God's holy days. So he says, don't let people judge you in what you eat or drink in respect of a holy day, the new moon, or the Sabbath. They added the word days in italics. So the fact that their Gentile neighbors were judging them in these areas proves they were still doing it. Do I have any questions?
There's a question for the end.
Because I also said, and I'm at the end, I'm finished, but I said this is going to be a Bible study, and I encourage your questions. Y'all have been a very quiet group today. Of course, I know a lot of this is review, but it's called an overview. All right, what's the question there?
Well, let me go back to Rod, because we're back to the palms again. He
Okay.
said palms were one of the 4 plants associated with tabernacles around Leviticus 40, so we are left to wonder why they had them at Passover.
Yeah.
And then Patty,
Could have been just a cultural thing that they had.
Patty is asking, the high priest doing the wave sheet, were they also involved in Christ's death?
Yeah, very definitely. Caiaphas was the high priest, and at 3 o'clock they had 2 daily sacrifices according to the book of Numbers, one in the morning and one at evening, not in the evening, but at evening. That would be the afternoon sacrifice that Josephus talks about. So you have the 9 o'clock, 3rd hour of the day, and you have the 9, that would be the 3 o'clock according to Roman time. Then you have the 9 o'clock offering. That'd be our 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, kind of opposite. So at the evening sacrifice, when Christ died at the 9th hour, at the evening sacrifice, Caiaphas was slitting the lamb of the Passover lamb. He was slitting the lamb's throat at the temple. So Caiaphas himself had something to do with putting Jesus on the cross. He's the one who said it's expedient that one man die for the nation and not all the people die. So yes, Caiaphas had Christ crucified on the 14th day of the month of Abib, and at the same hour he was killing the Passover lamb of the temple. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's the delay, so
Okay.
give us a few seconds.
There is a 10-second delay while we're waiting on people maybe to get their questions coming. Anybody got a question here? This was supposed to be a Bible study. Y'all supposed to be, I thought you'd be asking me questions left and right.
Ready?
I'm ready for a question.
JR, it stands to reason that so many people coming to Jerusalem had to make, oh, there's another one. It had to make temporary structures, and they already knew how to do that from tabernacles.
That's true, yeah. They could still live with people at the housetops there because they had, a million people, over a million.
Mm-hmm. And then Guy, the Colossians were Gnostics, and they were judging the Christians for observing feasts.
Yeah, a lot of them were Gnostics because they followed Plato, and they were judging the Christians for doing it. And judgment also sometimes includes condemnation. Any further questions?
Give us a few more seconds.
Boy, you guys have been quiet today. Well, keep up with what's going on in the news. I highly recommend you watch Fox News because they're not as biased as MSNBC and CNN. The other day, this lady, Tammy Duckworth, who's a Democrat, she says if you're pro-life, you're a racist.
Well,
Imagine being pro-life and that makes you a
Well,
racist.
what, don't you remember one of our graduates told you the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And she said because African American women have to have the right, if they want to kill their babies, they need to have that right. So if you're pro-life, you're against black women. That's crazy. Now, the Black Lives Matter movement is supposed to be interested in black lives. What about the 900 children that are murdered every day who happen to be African American children? I'm trying to save their lives. I'm pro-life. But now I'm a racist if I try to save their lives. I tell you what, they are absolutely insane in our government today. Insane. They don't make any sense. So watch Fox News. You'll get a lot of information you won't get on CNN.
It is written that in the end days that good will be marked as bad and bad will be,
Yeah.
good and evil will be pretty much flipped.
Yeah. Woe to them that call good evil and evil good, and they got it flipped. All right, y'all be blessed. Have a wonderful week. Good to see everybody here and our international audience. If you have any questions, you can still write them in. Maybe we'll get to them later. Have a blessed week, and we'll hope to see y'all next
And
week.
if any of y'all, watching online, wanna join us for communion and for the high days, you're welcome to.
If they're baptized.
Oh, if you're baptized, yes. Do you wanna say anything about if there's anybody on there that wants to get baptized, or you gonna?
Not today, I don't think.
Okay.
No. What she's talking about is sometimes we have a baptism right before Passover. I need to talk to our students about that too, if they
Okay.
want to.